The Almanac is where all the numbers in front office football come alive. This is where you're creating your football universe. As you can see, there are a lot of options here. They're all very simple. They just lead you to numbers displays. At the top you see individual statistics for a season. And here are the statistics from the 2098 season for quarterbacks, and you can look at basic rushing stats, receiving stats, kicking stats, all sorts of stats. And you can go through and you can look at any number of years, all the way back to when you started your franchise. They're all there, and it's all stored in an easy to read, quick format. You can also look at the adjusted line yards. This is a statistics from Football Outsiders, who we've partnered with to bring you the statistic. It's calculated the same way they do. It's a good measure of how an offensive line works, and it's taken straight from the results of all the plays during the course of any career. And again, you can see any year here. You can also see career totals. This screen does take a while to load. And here I've got a season or a career that's been running for more than 80 seasons. So that will take a minute. But the data will load, and you will see the totals from to keep in mind every player who ever played a game in this universe. So it's doing an awful lot of calculating, and this is the one screen in the entire game that does take a long time to calculate because it's just taking everything. Each season is stored in about 30 megabytes of data on your computer. So right now it's going through gigabytes worth of data to compile this data, and it does so very quickly. And once the screen is up, you can have access to that information immediately. So here it's loaded, and if you want to know who's thrown for the most passing yards, you can see it's Russell Justin, who played from, well, he's actually still playing from 2082 to 2098. We can look at his player card, and we see he's the Houston quarterback, and he's had quite a career. He's undoubtedly going to go to the Hall of Fame at some point. Obviously an elite quarterback, almost 10,000 passing attempts. And we go on down and see these players over the entire career. Some of them started when we first started the game. Here we can see that this version of Blake Bortles was very successful. Let's see the rushing leaders for the career. Les Holiday rushed for 17,487 yards. That's pretty close to the professional record. You can see the game does keep fairly accurate statistics for players over an entire career, and that's something that I've worked very hard to emulate, and that's the whole purpose of front office football simulation, is to create a realistic universe for players. You can also use that screen to look at totals for any individual team. Again, it will recalculate everything, so that'll take a while. Otherwise, I would have shown that off as well. You can look at team statistics for a year. Here are the rushing totals, again, for any season you want. You can see 2077, league average was 4.32 yards per carry. Average team ran for 115 yards per game. You can look at lineman stats, kicking stats, total scoring stats. Again, for any year in the entire history of your particular universe. You can look at team for team numbers. This is Pittsburgh. You can see that you want to know who they've won most games against? It's Cleveland. They're 95 and 77 over the 80 some odd years that they've been running. List of the front office bowl winners, including the most recent one, and the scores of all those final games, highlighted whenever your team participated. The record book, you have career records, and this will show the top 100 performances in every statistical category over your career. So here's the overview, and if you want to see who rushed the most in their career? Well, Levi Pisano has 3,627 rushing attempts for his career. And all the way down, 100th place is Zachary Grant with 1967. Single game records. You want to know who had the most pass attempts in a game. And you can see that's 73. I think the professional record is 70 for the 50 years that the NFL has been in operation. Single season records as well. You can look at the players who are involved in this at a single click. You have playoff game records for teams and for individuals. So if you want to know who scored the most in a playoff game, it's all here. Every week there are players who are nominated for the Player of the Week. This is obviously from the Front Office Bowl, since that was the last game played. And you have season awards after every year. The first and second team for all league. And again, you can see that all the way back to the beginning of your career, if you like. There's a Player of the Year award, a Coach of the Year award. Again, the list. Legend of the game is a player who retired that year, who is considered, he doesn't have to be a great player, but a veteran. Sweat Sox is kind of a humorous take on the most notorious team, the teams that are in the most in the news, teams that have players with a lot of personality. They get featured each season. Gives a little bit of a boost to their popularity when they're involved in that. You got the league's fastest man. They all get timed every year, and these are the current fastest times in the league. You can see that a couple of New England players are really fast this year. Similarly, the strongest player in the league, usually lineman. The quarterback coterie. This is an interesting index where players are measured over the course of their careers. Each year they receive a grade, which is normalized around 50. So the top quarterbacks in the league would receive a 99. So this is not quite like the quarterback rating, although it's a similar concept. It's normalized each year, so it's not really like that. And if you want to see how your quarterback is doing compared to other quarterbacks his age, you can do this. So if you want to see who had the best rookie season of any quarterback, it was this guy Frank Buckley, who's currently the Kansas City quarterback. And you can see that generally players who start as first-year players are generally go on to have long careers. Just a good way of tracking how your quarterback is doing, because a quarterback is definitely the most important person in this league, as it is in real life. The amateur draft history. Every pick made in any season, any round, shows how many games they've started. A link to his page, so you can take a look at how he did. And this goes back before 2014 when this league started, because there's still players around who aren't necessarily having player pages. But here, once you start in 2014, every player is mentioned. And you can just go back and click on them, see how they did. There's a Hall of Fame, and if you get really good, they'll retire your number. So you can see who was voted in and what their percentage was, what team they played the most games for. Their income statements, that's how your team performed financially. You can see Pittsburgh is extremely profitable right now. Some teams aren't as profitable, and that again goes back to as long as you want. Franchise value, track to see which franchises are currently worth the most. You can see that Carolina, with probably a brand new stadium here, is worth 4.8 billion. Remember, this is 2099 right now, so things are a little more inflated at this point. You can look at an overview of all the stadiums in the league, do a price comparison, see how much it costs to take an average family of 4 to the games these days. It gets pretty expensive these days. Carolina, again, charging the most. But in 2098, even the cheap seats cost $300. City information. You can tell which cities want franchises in case a city moves. Milwaukee's first in line here. You probably have the most success going there. Columbus, Ohio is also in great need. Regional growth trends tell you which areas of the country are growing the most in recent years. So more population means more demand for franchises. You can look at your team history here. This shows how you did each year, going back to the beginning of the simulation. Who your coach was, what your record was, how far did you make it in the playoffs, who your top statistical performances were from. You can look at any team that you want here. You can graph any team. This shows in graphic form how they did during the regular season and whether they made it to the playoffs and how far they got. A gold bar is a front office championship. The GM history, that shows how you did in your performance rankings for each season during your career. And then you can create HTML, which allows you to create a website using the statistical information from a league. It's not terribly sophisticated, and you can export the data in a couple of different ways, which is mostly, the exports are mostly for use in setting up a website outside of the game completely. That's something that you have to do on your own or with a league if you're involved in a league. And you can reset all your Steam achievements using this button. Anyway, that's all for the Almanac. There's an awful lot in there. They're all very simple commands, but as you can see, they access the vast front office football database in many different ways.